Hi, I got a question for you. What does this have to do with this, or this, or this, or this? You probably guessed it, grapevines. The first picture is the grapevines that are in my backyard. And if you live in the Southeast, you probably have access to them somewhere because they are everywhere. These are wild grapes and they grow all over the place in Georgia where I live. You can use those grapevines to make these. These are plain wreath forms that you can use to make wreaths like those. So if you're interested in learning how to do this, join me. I'm Nadia and I help people find their creativity. Stay tuned. Hi, I'm out here demonstrating how I make grapevine wreaths. If you live anywhere in the Southeast and possibly other places in the U.S., you will be familiar with these. If you have access to the woods, you more than likely have access to these. These are grapevines. And here in central Georgia, they are everywhere. You can tell that they're grapes by the leaves. This is what the leaves look like. So, what you would do first is try to pull some off. So it looks like this one came off without me having to cut it. So you have to get a few of these in order to make a good wreath. So, and depending on how big you want your wreath to be, that's gonna influence how many vines you need. But we're gonna need several nice sized ones. So we're gonna cut some of these. And one interesting thing about grapevines is, you know, when I first started doing this, I felt a little bit bad about cutting the grapevines down so much. But believe it or not, in order to produce grapes, they actually need to be cut back. And I was wondering one day why they would evolve that way. It didn't seem to make sense to me. But the reason is that when grapevines evolved, there were large herbivores that would eat all the vegetation back every year. And so the grapevines evolved to take advantage of that. So now it's necessary for the vegetation to get cut back for the grapevines to be able to produce. So I'm really not hurting the grapevines at all. And they definitely will grow back, that's for sure. You want kind of long ones, and you also want ones that aren't too narrow. So you want to get like nice thick-ish ones. These are about the width, a little bit less than the width of a pencil. If you can find the width of a pencil, that'd be great, but most of mine are not that thick. So. And you see these other friends here. These are greenbriers. They're also ubiquitous in the Southeast. Okay, so I have enough to get started at least. So the way you're going to start with these, let's put this down. The way you're going to start with these is you find a vine, if there's anything growing off of it, like other vines, you try to get rid of those for the most part. These little curly things can stay. So depending on how big you want your wreath, that's how big you're going to make your initial circle. I think mine needs to be like 20 something inches, so I'm going to start rather big on this one. So you put it in a circle and then you twine it around and continue to do that until it stays. And then you keep adding. You do the same thing. Another thing you can do is, for variety, you can just circle it around. And once you start running out of length, then you can just twine it then. Do it on both sides. Keep it on there good. Okay, and you try to add it evenly to all the sides of the wreath, obviously. So if you find that it's not having a lot of vine on one end, then you probably need to put some more on that end. We're getting there. See, we got a nice circle going. And you know, sometimes if you have one that starts out thick and then gets thinner on down, which is pretty common, sometimes like at first you'll have like a wreath that's not really a perfect circle. If you keep going and you keep placing them evenly so that the thickness and strength of each one is that it, you know, is different at different points, then it'll eventually turn into a circle like this. So we keep doing this, twisting it around. And if you find that one is difficult to work with because it's too long, you can always cut it and, you know, use it in two pieces. Or you can also do this thing again, where you wind it around. Just make sure you do it kind of evenly so you don't end up with pieces with some of it sticking out somewhere. And any leaves that are still on there, you're probably going to want to get those off. It's fall here in Georgia, so we don't have a lot of leaves on them. There's still a few left on there. And if you notice that there's some loose like this, then that's where you're going to want to kind of twine it around to try to tighten it up. I think it looks pretty good to have a mix of the twisted ones and the ones that are just circled around. I think that makes for a pretty good looking wreath when you do that. Feeling this one is probably not going to be big enough, but that's okay. Right. And you just keep adding and running them around. Man, even though it's fall, these mosquitoes are still bad out here. Eating alive on the potatoes. So, looks like I have a friend here that's helping. That's Mr. Booger. He didn't get that name because he's a booger. He's actually a very sweet kitty. He's named Mr. Booger because of the marking on his nose. He has a little booger on his nose. We once had this cat. It was kind of a stray. It would come by, and it had like a perfect mustache. We called him Mr. Mustache, but he was an intact male, and you know how those cats get. They wander off and get into fights and stuff, and one day we just didn't see him anymore. Okay, so this is decent. I think I'm gonna want mine a little bit thicker though. So I'm gonna get a few more vines, and you know, there's no hard and fast rule as to how thick they need to be. It just depends on your needs for the for whatever you're doing in terms of wreaths. For example, when I make my herb wreaths, I usually make them very narrow because the wreath part is not, the wreath part is not going to be showing. It's just a form onto which I put my herbs. So it's not really important how wide it is. You notice it's got these little curly things. The vines use these to climb up stuff, to climb up other plants, to climb up trees, and they're pretty effective. I don't know if you've ever seen grapevine that's gotten all the way up to the top, but that happens a lot. And it would not be possible not for these little curly things that hang on. And I usually like to leave them on when I make a grapevine wreath. I think it makes it look more interesting. Sometimes you'll have one that wants to pop out. Then you just kind of tuck it in under another one. That usually works. And you keep doing this. And there's other vines you can actually do this with. You know, wisteria is kind of a problem here in Georgia. People like it because it makes those pretty flowers in the springtime, but it's actually very invasive, and it does kill trees. I've seen it bring down some big trees. So if you have wisteria that you want to cut, you can make these out of it. It'd be a good way to use some of those vines. And I'm trying to think of other ones. I've never tried it with kudzu, but that would be another one to try. It's another kind of nuisance plant here. That, if you're not familiar with kudzu, it's a vine that was planted, I want to say, like during Dust Bowl time to prevent erosion. But unfortunately, it really liked it here, and it has now taken over in a lot of places. I'm sure you may have seen some iconic looking pictures where vines have like taken over like a building, where they're all over the building. More than likely that's kudzu, especially if the picture was taken down south here. Here in Georgia, kudzu is everywhere. I don't think we have it on our property, but you know, a lot of places like scrub areas by the road and stuff, you'll see it, and it gets a little crazy. In the late summer, it actually makes these flowers that smell like grape soda. grape candy. It's real crazy. They smell just like it. But that's not really enough to recommend the plant to anyone. Okay, we're getting a little more girth on this thing. It's getting to be a little better looking. Maybe a couple more vines and then we'll be done on this. So here's a couple more. And you know, if you have to get a narrow one, that's not a big deal. It's not the end of the world or anything. It's just that sometimes with the narrow ones, you'll have a long end that's green, and if you have a green end, you probably need to just either snap it off or get it off somehow, because it's not going to last. You know, the woody vine parts will dry out, and you know, they last for a good long time, but the green parts are not going to. Almost done with this thing, and that's good because I'm getting eaten alive out here by mosquitoes. Another option would have been for me to pick the vines and then take them somewhere where there weren't as many mosquitoes. That probably would have been a smart idea, but you know, sometimes I don't know exactly how many vines I'm gonna need. So a lot of times I'll do it right here where I'm cutting the vines, just like you see me doing right now. You can hear them buzzing in my ear. So I managed to finish the wreath without getting eaten completely by mosquitoes. Here's the finished wreath. You can see it's not super wide, but it's not real narrow either. It's definitely wide enough to do a lot of things with. From here you could put on some artificial flowers, you could put on some real flowers, you could put on some herbs, you could put on like dried plants. That makes a nice looking wreath. You can also put on cotton. I've done some cotton wreaths here before. People tend to like those down here. So I hope you enjoy learning how to make these. I enjoyed showing you, and I hope to see you next time. Bye.